Hello guys and gals, this is me Mamba,
The Angry Gorilla.
and we're reviewing Fallout New Vegas. Now I got a special treat today because, well, me and Angry Gorilla here like the game.
I know, it's such a disaster. Both of us agreeing on something, it's unheard of in the gaming industry.
Well, not really, because we agree on Doom.
Yeah, and Halo,
Yeah.
and Gears of War, well, for the most part. You
Yeah.
think Gears of War is kind of generic, don't you?
No, I don't.
Yeah,
It's
you
fine.
do.
No, I don't.
Yeah, you do.
It's fine.
Yeah,
It's
you
just
do.
all the games that copied Gears of War.
Yeah, I know. I'm just joking. But in all seriousness, it's a tragedy that we finally agreed on something for the most part.
Yeah.
It's just sickening.
So, where do you even start? You know, you give the story because I just got lost
Okay.
towards the end. Like, I just gave up. I'm like, okay, man.
So, Fallout New Vegas is a story that a lot of people would say is worse than Fallout 3's. And part of the reason is that when Fallout 3 was being made, it was being made by Bethesda, and they really tried to put their own touch on the Fallout franchise with not only the gameplay tweaks in Fallout 3 compared to 1 and 2, but also with the story, which was its own thing. But in Fallout, the story is completely based around the events of Fallout 1 and 2. It's basically represented by Planet Warfare and such. So it's kind of hard to explain, but basically you're a courier. Yeah, so you're a courier. You get shot in the head and lose your memory. And you have to find the guys who did it. Now, I don't want to spoil that much, but what's really interesting about the story, and I know that Manbat in particular prefers Fallout 3 story, but I think this story is a lot better because it really delves itself into the Fallout lore, and it really just centered itself around Fallout 2, which in my opinion was the best Fallout game to date. I mean, to put it frankly, I've only played a few hours of that game, and I can already tell it's the best game in the franchise.
I've even
So-
seen gameplay of Fallout 2 and that looks pretty damn good.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
it's just, Fallout 3's lore is really, there is lore, but the stories are based around the lore, whereas in New Vegas, if you're not a Fallout fan, you probably won't be interested in the story, which is partially why it got such mixed reviews when it came to the story of the game compared to Fallout 3. It is a bit less sensitive. A lot of people really connected with Liam Neeson as the dad in Fallout 3. I personally think Liam Neeson could have done a lot better job. I think the script was pretty terrible in Fallout 3, and I don't think it was a very good story. But I do understand the emotional connection people had with Fallout 3's plotline. There's not really emotional connection here. It's based entirely on lore. So if you want something that's skin deep, you're not getting it in Fallout New Vegas. You didn't get it that much in Fallout 3, so let's face it, you're not going to get it in New Vegas. How do you feel about the story, basically?
Like, it's mixed. Like, how it starts up is a lot faster than 3, and I do appreciate that. It sets itself up a lot faster. But I don't know, I didn't feel invested in here. The only thing that kept me invested was the gameplay, which was actually a lot better, and the scenery wasn't depressing.
Yeah,
That's what killed it for 3 for me.
Well, that's graphics. We'll talk about that a bit later. But this is the second game I played in the Fallout series. The first one's 3. I really couldn't stand 3 from the moment I picked it up. I played New Vegas. I really liked New Vegas. And I figured out the reason why was that there was just so much lore in the story. And so, if you're not a Fallout fan, or if you just don't care for in-depth lore, this game's main storyline isn't going to intrigue you. And honestly, that's something that that's something I do appreciate a game whose story is based around lore from the franchise, but it's also something that I feel like Obsidian could have done a better job with, because you have to understand Fallout 3 was one of the most popular games of all time. Of course, you're going to have to make the story a bit easier to be invested for a newcomer to the Fallout series. So the fact that they made it confusing and they made it based on previous Fallout entries isn't really something we should be clapping about. They could have done a better job, made it easier for new fans to get in, but overall I do think it's a better story than Fallout 3.
Okay, and I guess we'll delve into the graphics right about now.
Yeah.
So what's your opinion on that?
There's not much to see. This is a game that's glitchier than Fallout 3, which is a bit disappointing. It's also got worse frame rate.
Yeah, I'm recording it
And-
right now and the frame rate is bad.
Yeah, but the overall presentation is really good, especially well, it's not really good, but it is a step up, and I think the biggest reason why is the lighting and the color palette. I really don't like games like Fallout 3 that are nothing but brown and gray realistic graphics, because at the end of the day, Fallout 3 doesn't look very realistic. It looks muddy, it looks watered down. It has the brown and gray gets annoying after a while. Whereas in Fallout 3, they weren't trying to go for something too realistic. It was supposed to be a Western setting, so there's a lot of color in the game, a lot more than Fallout 3. It might not be the most colorful game in the world, but that's not what they're going for. They're going for something somewhat realistic, somewhat colorful, and somewhat post-apocalyptic. And I think, for the most part, this game hits that. You know, it's a nail on the coffin. They could have made it look a bit more post-apocalyptic. I think that's the problem a lot of people have with Fallout New Vegas. Is it really doesn't look too much like a post-apocalyptic game at first, but once you delve into areas that, you know, the game sets you in, you realize it really does look like a post-apocalyptic game in certain areas. So it does have good graphics.
And the problem with me too, the problem with Fallout 3 graphics for me was they did a really good job of making it like look like it's broken, beat down, and everything, but
Yeah,
it felt too depressing.
Yes.
It dragged me down at times. I was like, probably wasn't the best game playing at that time. It was. Wasn't the best of places. So that didn't help. But
yeah.
I kept pushing on because of the story. And here, what pushes you on is how the game looks. It's not depressing. It's actually pretty fun. Pretty vibrant for the most part. And at the same time, it still feels realistic. So, yeah, it's not going too far. Or too small, you know. It's
Yeah.
perfect. And yeah. And it is glitchier than Fallout 3, but I haven't really ran into the glitches per se.
And it's worth noting that if you're comparing this to other games, it really is a huge step down. I mean, you have to understand, this game's a pretty recent game. It's about 4 or 3 years old now. And I'm gonna be honest with you, the engine that Fallout New Vegas is based on is a terrible engine. It's based on the Oblivion engine, just the Fallout 3 game. And really, even compared to other open world games at the time, it's disappointing how bad the graphics are, but it's also a huge game. So, like I said, when I was praising the graphics, it's because I was comparing it to Fallout 3, which is a game that looks terrible nowadays. But
Okay, I guess
I
we're
don't
doing
know.
this.
I think they should have gone with a different engine. Frankly, the Rio engine would be terrible. Especially because of Fallout 3 and Fallout Vegas are notorious for being glitchy. But overall, the graphics are okay for a Fallout game. As a Fallout game, they're pretty good. As a regular game, they're just decent. Kind of mediocre. That's about it.
Yeah, I have to agree. And one thing that saves Fallout 3 on the PCs, unlike the Fallout New Vegas, I mean, and 3 for that matter, is the modding community. It is there. That's prevalent at Skyrim, but still there for the most part. And since we have actual guns in this game, it's a bit bigger in the weapon department.
Yeah.
A lot bigger.
Get up, boss.
In fact, installing costume stuff is a lot more in pain in the butt in this game than it is in the other games. They mainly download gun mods. And also texture upgrades.
I've installed that many mods, but I definitely agree with you for the most part.
Yeah.
Are we gonna talk about the gameplay next?
Yeah. Gameplay, it's a bit different than Fallout 3. Like, with me, I noticed a lot more hordes of enemies are hurling at you in this game.
Yeah. So, is there anything else?
Well, gameplay's pretty much the same as Fallout 3, except you got actual iron sights. Which some could say is a bonus, others could say, no, it's going too streamlined, too mainstream, you know. With every game now
What do you
these days
say?
doing that. Personally, I could care less. Be more accurate? Okay, fine. Whatever.
I have to say I like it more, but it's really not. Really, the iron sights in this game suck a lot, so it's almost like I don't even care what system they go with. I do like the iron sight system more, but a lot of the main weapons in this game that you'll be using, like the basic pistols and the basic rifles, even the high-powered rifles, don't have the best sights. So that's a big problem with this game. I know they're trying to go for something realistic, but why do you implement a system and then keep crappy sights in the game? It just doesn't make any sense. But overall, I do prefer the sight system. For a lot of people, it's probably going to be a noticeable difference, but I definitely notice it. I mean, I'm personally a lot more accurate with it.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah. One thing I will say though about the gameplay is it seems a lot more like a hardcore RPG in comparison to Fallout. One of the things they brought back, and I forget what it's called. I'm pretty sure it's not perks. It was a system in Fallout 1 and 2 where it gave you a pro, but it also gave you a con. It basically worked like a perk. This was not in Fallout 3, and the fact that they included this in New Vegas was really cool. Because what this means is that, yeah, you're upgrading your character, but you're making it worse in certain departments. And this was a really smart system because what it meant was you couldn't really be an ace of all trades, you could somewhat be a jack of all trades, but it encouraged multiple playthroughs. And that's something that I think RPGs like Skyrim and Fallout 3 really failed on, because if you played Fallout 3, you know you could be the best melee fighter in the game, the best gunsman in the game, the best clubber in the game, all in one profile. But this game really does force you to a certain extent, not blatantly forces you, but it forces you to make decisions on how you want your character to be. And the fact that it utilizes the RPG mechanics by making you have multiple playthroughs to experience different sources of combat is really cool, and it's something that I wish more mainstream RPG developers would do.
Also would like to add to this is gameplay department is okay, the third person camera in here works a hell of a lot better than it did in Oblivion. They improved that in Fallout 3, I believe. It's the same in here as it was in 3.
Yeah, it's basically the same. I will say I think it's a bit better in Vegas, but it's almost unnoticeable.
Yeah.
So, it's not even worth mentioning, really. I don't think there's that many people that play this in third person. Like, that's...
I sometimes
know
like
people,
to do that.
Yeah, I know, but I know there's going to be hundreds of people saying, well, we play in first person. You have to realize millions of people play Fallout, so you're still in the minority no matter what. It just switching to third person every now and again doesn't count. Like, I'm talking about you mainly play in first person.
Yeah, I do mainly play in first person, but I
mean,
like to switch
no,
to
third person.
occasionally.
Yeah.
Just to mix up things, you know.
Yeah. But so the story, the gameplay, are we already done?
I think so.
But this
Personal
seems really
nitpicks,
short.
I guess.
Personal nitpicks. Okay, what is your personal nitpicks?
Frame rate sometimes is very inconsistent for me. Sometimes it can run it buttery smooth, other times it runs like crap.
Yeah. Okay, one thing I will say is a personal nitpick for this game, and this is going to sound stupid, considering just saying how much I like this game more than Fallout 3 because it's a hardcore RPG. Basically, I do think the pacing in this game and the overall difficulty do not mix well together at all. There are a lot of sections in this game that are much harder than sections that came like 2 minutes before it. That's really a problem, especially because the beginning it's like all the missions are easy, even the side missions are easy. even the higher level side missions are easy in the beginning of the game. But then you get, and it just gets really hard really fast. I don't think the pacing is you also pretty good. You pour a lot of time and effort into the side quests. Like when I first played this game, I tried to play the main storyline before completing most of the side quests, and that's because I was used to shooters like, you know, Halo Reach, where the main campaign's only 10 hours. The main campaign is short and Fallout. To complete it in a timely fashion and without dying, you really have to spend side quests. That's not necessarily a problem, but it does break up the flow of the game a bit. And I think it's another reason why a lot of people didn't really like this game in comparison to 3. Like I said, that's just a part of a hardcore RPG. That's something that people should be used to by now, but either way, it's annoying how bad the pacing and difficulty mixed together. Do you agree with that, or am I just, you don't know what I'm saying?
You know what, I could see where you're getting at there, but I personally didn't have that bad of a time. It was towards the beginning for me a bit, but other than that,
I think there's a huge difficulty spike in the middle of the game. Like that one mission where you have to go underground and there's a bunch of robots. That's one of the hardest missions of the game, and it's like 2 hours into the game. So yeah, this is a game where I recommend you spend more time on the side quests than the main quests, so that you're high enough level to actually complete the main quest.
it's pretty much grinding for the most part.
Yeah.
It's level grinding. So if you're used to doing that in an RPG, then you'll be right at home here. If you're not, then
When I first got this game, I was not into grinding games because almost all I played was shooters.
Yeah.
But in Skyrim's really easy. So
Yeah.
I'd really recommend you understand that you really should grind a bit in this game.
Yeah. Also, like, I'm used to grinding in RPG since Pokemon. On the newer games you don't have to. In some of the older ones you did. So I'm used to grinding.
And I want to say another thing too, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
This is not a personal nitpick. This is a pro of the game. A huge problem with Fallout 3 and why I barely even consider it an RPG is that almost every answer to a problem in the game was shooting someone in the face or beating them to death. You have to understand that ever since tabletop RPGs, there's always been multiple solutions to a problem, and Fallout 3 didn't provide that. Fallout New Vegas, though, is very diverse in how you can solve problems. This is one of the few games nowadays, except for like Dishonored, where you can play almost an entire game without killing a single person. You don't have to. If you have high enough skills, you can get past most bandits. Not all of them, but you get my point. This is an RPG. There are really creative ways that you can get out of trouble in this game, and that's something Fallout 3 was really lacking. Like I said, there's also a huge amount of lore. This game is based entirely around the first few Fallout games. It's not just Fallout 3's lore, it's not just Fallout New Vegas lore, it's lore from every single game. And it also brings some new things to the table, so it really is a hardcore RPG.
And, like, the new stuff they added in here, like the new armors and everything, they look nice. They look like they fit in the Fallout universe in general.
Yeah,
and they added some old stuff, too.
Yeah, and a lot of the clans in this game are based on previous clans, like the Kaiser Empire is based on a clan from Fallout 2. So like I said, this game basically references the best game in the franchise every part of the game. So if you really love Fallout 2, you'll probably like Fallout New Vegas.
Yeah.
Because Fallout 3 really does, it's the worst installment in my opinion.
I haven't played any of the other two Fallouts. I've only played this in New Vegas. I played a bit of the first one, but couldn't really get into it. Because I was at a time where I was very impatient, so I could probably do it now.
I got both. I got Fallout 1, 2, and Tactics free on the GOG DMR free weekend.
Nice.
Yeah, GOG's.
Yeah.
Oh, you're solo.
What would you rate this game?
You're using GOG, you're solo. Okay, so this is hard because it's a game that has so many flaws, but it really is one of the most hardcore and well-made RPGs we've gotten in a long time. One of the best RPGs we've gotten lately was South Park: The Stick of Truth, and that's
Yeah, I played
also
that.
made by Obsidian Entertainment.
Yeah.
So, if you
And I'm
really
true to the
do,
source material too.
yeah, I know their titles are a bit niche, and they're not as popular as other titles. You know, Knights of the Old Republic 2 wasn't as popular as the first one, and that was made by Obsidian. You know, I think Neverwinter Nights 2 was made by Obsidian, and that was nowhere near as popular as the first. You know, you get my point. This is one of the first times where I really do think their sequel deserves more attention than the game it's based on. I mean, I know Fallout New Vegas isn't a sequel to 3, but it's basically the same game with a few adjustments. And I really do think it's a much better game in general. They added a lot of things from previous games, and they hadn't really taken anything away from 3. It's a lot more difficult, and it's much better in terms of being an RPG, and it has a lot more lore. So if you're looking for something that's just a plain hardcore RPG, but in a first-person style, you should really pick up Fallout New Vegas. And I think I would rate it an 8 out of 10.
And you know what? To close on my final point, I love this game because it's better than 3 overall. Even with its flaws and everything, it's a better game overall than...
Yeah.
I don't know. It's one of those games that came out at an odd time.
Yeah,
In
it came out
particular-
at a really odd time.
And that didn't help. And I
Yeah.
remember even seeing the cases for New Vegas, I find it more interesting than I did with Fallout 3's case.
Oh yeah, Fallout 3 is a boring case.
Yeah. And sometimes before I bought the PC version, I was tempted to pick up Fallout New Vegas. And, you know, just overall, the game's better. And I had a better time playing this game than I did with Fallout 3. And even if you're not like if you guys like gameplay over story, you're probably gonna enjoy this game a lot better. And yeah. So I would rate it, I would have to go with the same rating, an 8 out of 10. It's a good game. Too bad
Yeah.
Bethesda couldn't make as good a game as this.
Well, I don't think Bethesda can make as good a game as Square Enix, and they're one of the worst publishers of all time. So.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, they're not the worst publisher. They made good games, but they can't make any good games anymore.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure they're one of the worst publishers. Not the worst, but this year
Look-
I think
Look.
Ubisoft is the worst.
Well, look at what came out a couple years ago. Deus Ex Human Revolution. That was published by Square Enix. That game was...
That came out 3 years ago. I mean,
Yeah.
to put this in perspective, EA was good back when Mass Effect 2 came out, and that came out about only 5 or 4 years ago. So, in only 5 or 4 years, they have become literally the worst company in America in a lot of people's eyes. So, I mean, we could just talk about this all day.
Yeah.
But in general, what was your score?
Oh, it was an 8. The same as yours.
Okay, so our overall score is an 8 out of 10.
Yeah. So, yeah. If you guys like the review, please rate, comment, subscribe. Me, Manbat, and Angry Gorilla, we are out.